Hi everybody, Maitri from Growth Bites. Welcome to one more episode of Expert Speak session. My today's Expert Speak guest is Dr. Sonali Kusum, who is currently working as an Assistant Professor at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She started her career as a research associate and she's worked with UNICEF and then she ventured into the academic line and she's done her Ph.D. thesis on constructing a legal framework on surrogacy in India. And as a part of her research, her recommendations were accepted and included in the Rajya Sabha report. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with her today. Hey Sonali, welcome to the Expert Speak session, and looking forward to having a great conversation with you today. Hi Sonali, thanks a lot for joining today. It's really great to have you. So in today's session, we are going to address a lot of questions that we got from students. But before we dive into that question, I'm really curious to learn more about your journey. We're going to talk a little bit more about how you started off. And I also see you've done a great deal of research. So I'd like to understand more about your research part, right? So my first question to you is, how did you get started into this profession? So what prompted you to choose law as your profession?
Okay. First of all, Maitri, nice talking to you and thanks for having me. It's my absolute pleasure to be part of this. Okay, so talking about my initial start of the journey with law, I would like to say that I had done my humanities in my 12th standard. So that was, I think, very triggering factor for me because when I was studying some arts and humanities subjects, particularly sociology and all that and political science, I kind of realized that I'm very interested to work on issues of government and issues of what is happening in and around society. Okay, and also my experience again, my parents, my home, both my parents are academicians. They are both professors, so that also kind of influenced me that if I could take some higher studies. But I would say rather my personal interest in the whole gamut of social issues which is happening, and when I was studying my sociology and political science, I think I was very well taught by my professors there. I would like to mention one very important professor, Professor Augusta Paul. She taught us sociology, and the way she taught us, I think that made us to think like, if you want to take it up further or not. Okay, so I kind of thought that yeah, sociology and political science gives me a strong basis. And then I looked up where I can pursue some course. Then I thought law is an interesting field where you can combine some bit of sociology, some bit of law, because you cannot study law in isolation. You cannot just become a lawyer only by reading law books. You have to be well acquainted with society. What are your social institutions? What are the social issues? Again, political science becomes very important factor for law students. Anybody who is thinking to pursue law, I think if you're very well grounded with the political developments which is happening, it gives you a very good context to analyze which law has come in under which regime, what kind of policy is being framed, what kind of changes and amendments are happening in the law, as we can see in the present context also. So I think those two important factors. That's about it.
Great. I think there's a great bit of inspirational journey that drove you to this profession. So, yeah, so I'm also curious to understand a lot of law graduates, they would like to move on to either getting into a corporate, a fancy corporate career or practicing law. And I see you're more inclined towards research. So what prompted you to get into academic line?
Okay. See, yeah, this is quite a bit of misnomer that, if you're doing law, then after law, will you join just corporate because it pays you a lot? But I think in this time and age, we have a lot of international civil society organizations which pay you sometimes even more or as equivalent as, any of the corporate law firm. But besides that, I think law has come to a shape in today's time where you have multiple avenues coming from law. You can get into research, you can get into documentation, you can be even just merely a researcher with a law firm you can do a lot of things with law now. Just having qualified the law degree, and it is financially lucrative also. If I can just add in, I worked right after my LLM with UNICEF. So that was not a corporate, but it was paying me equally pretty good amount of money. But at the same time, it is also very good exposure because you correspond with a lot of network people, you correspond with NGOs, you correspond with lawmakers, you correspond with bureaucrats. So you like this experience as well. So I think one of that factor also played a role, because I think I myself studied from National Law School, Bangalore. So that is one place which is very, out of the box kind of ideas they promote. It's also very innovative. You get multiple avenues. Okay.
Yeah.
Besides that, I think now we have a lot of law websites where they, project a lot of upcoming developments, a lot of upcoming projects where you can work on. So I think anybody who's interested in thinking that, if I'm not going to go for corporate, what I'm going to do and what I'm going to earn from law, I think then, the answer is quite out there. You can just look at the websites itself. You can just see different kind of projects which universities offer. I myself am teaching as assistant professor in this. We have a lot of research centers which are also functioning along with our university campuses. So we can even work in there. So yes, this is what I have to say about it.
Okay. Yeah, I think as you mentioned, because the reason why I asked is, usually a lot of young, professionals or those who are just out of the college, they would think, it's better to start my practice so that I might get a, much broader experience, right? But I think as you clearly, shared your experience now, I think that is going to help a lot of students who are in, on crossroads or in confusion whether to pursue research or, take up a job at a corporate, right? Okay.
Yeah, if I just may add in a bit to that, I would just like to say that litigation itself is a great career. But litigation, you have to take it up with a challenge that you're going to wait for a few years. It's like an incubation period that you have to, kind of wait for some time. A lot of young students, like I'm teaching some of my students, they are doing LLM course here. So they have already done their LLB. Probably they have even practiced. After that, LLB, they have practiced and then they have come to LLM course. So I'm not discouraging them. They can continue. I think it's a very good field. But the thing is that nothing prevents you from, developing your skill set further. Litigation is always a career which is open to everybody who has done law. But I think right now in today's day and time, there are a lot of immense opportunities. Depending upon your knowledge and skill set, what you're good in, if you can assess yourself, you can apply to different avenues.
Okay. So as you mentioned about UNICEF experience, so I would like to understand a little bit more about, I see you work there as a research associate for the Center
Yes.
for Child and, Law, right? So how was your whole experience and what were the key research that you worked on? What was the key research that you, yeah.
Yeah, I joined UNICEF when I was just right after my LLM. It was kind of a campus placement for me from National Law School, Bangalore. So around 2011, there is like almost a decade back that we are talking about. That was my first job in UNICEF, and this was a UNICEF India country-sponsored project. It was hosted and anchored by Center for Child and Law, National Law School, Bangalore. Then we had to work more like a capacity building kind of work, and we had to conduct training programs. We had to prepare legal literacy module. A lot of times we organized conferences for the NGOs and even for the members of Child Commission. At that point of time when we had joined this project, one of the important tasks that we worked on was compiling compiling a manual for the members of the child commissions, because the Child Commission Act had come recently around then, and most of the states were given the directive that they have to formulate rules and regulation as to how to make these child commissions at the state level and national level function. So basically, our idea was, how do we bring about a manual wherein most of the members who are joining us for the first time, because this body itself was very new, it is a statutory body, child commissions in different states. So we were compiling a manual for the child commission members, and we would have a lot of training programs for them. We would also have a lot of legal literacy sessions for the students. So I myself visited a lot of colleges in Bangalore where we taught students basic little awareness about law. Some of them were very hands-on experience, like workshop where we taught students, like especially the children, as to how to file an FIR if you lose your wallet probably on the way to school or college. So how do you lodge an FIR? So it was very hands-on experience. A lot of classes, sessions were taken. Another important thing which I felt was very interesting development was networking and coordinating with the members and the chairpersons of the state commission. The Delhi State Child Commission, I think, has been very, very good in their work. We had worked with them. We had worked with Karnataka State Child Commission again. So we would have meetings. They would receive the cases, probably cases of like, high capitation fee or some kind of complaints against child sexual abuse which has taken place in school. So we would work my job as a legal research associate was to take up such cases, formulate the legal recommendations therein, and then place it before the commission members and the chairperson and brief them about it, and then they would take their course of action. So I also attended a lot of proceedings of the Child Commission, how it takes place, counseling, or also assisting the members in formulation of recommendation. Overall, it was a very interesting experience because we got to work with bureaucrats also there. We also worked with the state legal aid lawyers over there, because the Child Commission office also has its law officers. So sometimes we work with them. So it was a great exposure to work with the government agencies, like what kind of protocols we have to follow, in what manner we would want to place the suggestions. What a lot of times what happens is like as academicians or as a social activist or a human rights lawyer, people have too promising an idea or too utopian an idea. Probably you should also once in a while get in touch with how the government is working. What is the manner in which they want to receive your suggestion. It's not that the government is all opposed. I think that's a misnomer, that the government rejects everything outrightly. It's not so. I think you also need to have like a collaborative approach. I think that also helped me a lot to learn like how to work with the government agencies, how to prepare the documentation, how do we place our recommendations so that it is kind of accepted in their framework, because they are also coming with some kind of constraints and framework and procedures that they have to report to. Yeah.
Okay.
So overall, it was a very interesting experience for me to place my research in the government kind of a portal. So yes.
Okay. Okay. So I also see that your current PhD thesis, which is in the surrogacy bill, right?
Yes.
So I see that all your recommendations are considered in the Rajya Sabha bill, which is really a commendable work. I must appreciate for that.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah. So I would like to understand what prompted you to choose your research in the surrogacy. And what are some of your suggestions, suggestions that were considered in this report?
Yes, with regard to surrogacy, I would like to say, first of all, that surrogacy is a very, it's an area which is very close to my heart because of the number of years and the amount of hard work I had to put in to bring it to the level that my research contributions could be recognized in the Rajya Sabha report. I'm very thankful that finally the Rajya Sabha report has included most of my recommendations which I had posited. Okay, so bringing about this whole issue of surrogacy, first of all, I would like to say that surrogacy as such, when I took up the research for PhD, and even till date, there is no such textbook on law and surrogacy, on the Indian context. We have books on surrogacy, but focusing from gender perspective, from, ethnography studies have been done. Some studies have been done from feminist literature and things like that. But when I started to look at surrogacy, I saw on one side there is this whole contemporary issue going on in India around 2008, 2010 that foreigners are coming to India and Indian women are becoming surrogate mothers for foreigners. And it was also very, in a very derogatory terms, there was a lot of media reports and also a lot of NGO studies also. They said that it is exploitation of women and there is this issue of renting of the wombs of the women, and there's a lot of ethical debate which this issue provokes. But having said that, since I had done my LLB and LM previously, of course, so I was aware of the legal framework. And one thing which struck me was that this is an area where there is no such documented research. Per se, law research, there is nil. Secondly, there is another area which is speaking of exploitation and some misuse. Now, when on the other side there is no law, even as we are speaking today, there is only a bill which has been approved. This is a surrogacy regulation bill 2019 which has been approved, but yet to be given effect. Okay. So that kind of made me think that coming from a law background, which tells me that whatever is ethical or unethical is doesn't become illegal. or whatever is, as per gender perspective or as per any perspective as such, that's not necessarily what, the legal regulations could be. It can influence, but at the same time, there is no binding law on surrogacy. So that made me reflect, like, this is an area which could be researched on, because there were some reports which were valid and genuine to say that there are some cases where there's a scope for exploitation, if not per se exploitation, but there is a scope. Yeah. So I looked into this area. I started doing a lot of content review from the media, as well as some, and I borrowed heavily from most of the studies which have been conducted in UK and USA. Okay. So that gave me an inspiration, because when I saw the foreign perspectives, I realized that in foreign countries there are regulations. So I looked at it, and then I saw, is there scope where we can have similar legislations in India? And it was also about the time I saw in the reports the government is looking for some kind of a legal regulation, and there were teams constituted, and they were asking for recommendations. So I just started building my research themes around it, that, what are the legal issues. One of the legal issue which I decided to take up was, first of all, if there is an exploitation, what sort of exploitation are we talking about? Are we talking about bodily exploitation of the women? Is it the issue of medical informed consent issue of the women, that the women are not aware what they are signing for? Because it was always said that these women are not aware, and, doctors are being labeled sometimes, some middle agencies are labeled. So I wanted to know, first of all, ground level, what is the scenario? How does a woman become surrogate? So I conducted a field study. I involved myself with some of the infertility clinics, and they restricted, but later on, I had some kind of access with them. I interviewed around 30 odd surrogate mothers, and then at Karnataka, Bangalore, and I also interviewed some surrogate mothers in Delhi. So then I realized that there are some issues which are not addressed in law and which needs to be discussed. Some of the recommendations, therefore, which I could formulate was much with the interactions from the government stakeholders, because sometimes I also visited this ICMR body, and the people who are involved in making of the law, I interviewed them. That gave me a very good idea as to, where do we stand, what kind of policy they are looking at. On the other side, when I heard the surrogate mothers and when I visited the clinics, I also got the chance to speak to some of the couples who are doing surrogacy. And surprisingly, I found there were many NRIs. They are not necessarily foreigners, but there were many, Indian citizens. And also in Bangalore, I saw there were like a lot of IT couples. And I can't say maybe some other background also, but mostly since in Bangalore IT, so I saw a lot of them also. Then I realized that there are 3, 4 perspectives to the story, and that needs to come about. So when I took up a research in surrogacy, I wanted to have a very unbiased approach, and having a view which accommodates all the stakeholders, the surrogate mothers. And since I visited the clinics, I also got to know some of the egg donors and the sperm donors, and also this couples, the doctors, as well as the ICMR committee members. I used to present a lot of research papers at various conferences held at ICMR. So that gave me a forum to interact with these fertility practitioners. So when I compiled all my findings, and I realized that there is a very strong basis to come up with, some recommendations or some kind of suggestion. So one of the first thing which I recommended in the Rajya Sabha report, which got accepted, was that so much so people say that altruistic surrogacy is good. So I was with the idea that maybe altruistic surrogacy is not necessarily feasible, because I found that there are many couples who are at a very young age, early 30s or late 20s, and they're not having child, and they do not want to adopt. And now we cannot force anyone to adopt. Okay, you can adopt even when you are fertile, you have a baby, nobody is stopping you. Okay, but if people want to have their own genetic link, and we have right to privacy, we will decide when to have a child, by which means we want to have a child, and how many numbers, and what is the spacing, at what stage I want to have a child. I cannot have the state regulation to tell me that, I have to have a child only through this means. Okay, and I cannot impose, I think, considering right to life and right to privacy and personal bodily autonomy, that, okay, fine, you only adopt who's infertile. Why to impose a burden on them? Let them have a free choice if they want to. And I strongly felt that there are lots of people who want to only go for surrogacy, at least one chance they want to have. And besides that, I looked at this perspective, and I recommended that, one of the things which should be included in the law is that freedom to decide how you want to have the baby. And if a couple, they are legally married, as per the regulations and all that is a valid wedlock, or and even for couples, I also posited that one of the things that people who are live-in relation partners, okay, we have in India Domestic Violence Act, which also talks about this particular legislation, Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. It recognizes relations in nature of marriage is valid. Okay, so when you have that recognition, then even live-in partners, okay, should be allowed. Another thing is that we have Juvenile Justice Act and CARA guidelines, Central Adoption Resource Agency guidelines, which talks about any adult in India to have a child, to kind of to have a child through adoption, and it allows any adult male or female to adopt. Okay, you don't need to be married. Okay, it allows widows, divorcees also to adopt. So having said that, this was also coming to me that when you have similar law that which allows you to adopt anybody's baby, why can't you use your own gametes? Okay, so that's a logic. So I recommended that. And one of the things which I also felt strongly was that altruistic surrogacy, saying that, only your family members should be surrogate, or somebody like your sister-in-law, mother-in-law should be surrogate for you, is not a very practical or a pragmatic approach. Coming from a law background, I realized if you have that, what happens, there are inheritance issues. Yeah. Because if, and then on the other side, we have evidence law, which says that, the woman who gives birth becomes the mother. That is the irrebuttable presumption in favor of women who's giving birth. So I saw there are lots of legal issues which are, mired into this. So I was like, there should be a surrogacy arrangement, but which should be compensated. Because a woman who is going to be surrogate for you, she's risking her life. Any pregnancy bears that life-threatening risk. So you should have a woman who's bearing this baby for you. You should compensate her for all the kind of, health loss that she's incurring. Besides that, what about her family? What if she dies and she has a child, yeah, of her own? Then you cannot have that kind of a scenario where in order to produce a baby, she, two other children or one child is deprived of his mom. So I was very much against this idea. And I said that there has to be social security for the surrogate mother, insurance cover for the surrogate mother's own children also, and also for the child who's being born. These recommendations were taken up. Then the other thing is with respect to altruistic surrogacy, I found one or two cases where, women have been coerced under family pressure, patriarchal pressure, yeah, that they have to be surrogate. Inside the house, how do you know her consent is valid, free, and informed? Because at the clinic, at least you have doctors to counsel you. You have something in writing. Here, if you have altruistic, you're not even paying that woman. She's bearing the maximum risk. Doctors are taking the fee, couples are getting the baby, but you expect only the surrogate to be altruistic and to be charitable interest. Doesn't work. It's not equitable distribution of benefit and burden. So I said it's very much against equality, Article 14. So I was just against that idea. So somehow the Rajya Sabha is also of the sound opinion that yeah, there has to be a compensation scheme. So right now that recommendation is also accepted. The other point which I think, which is not yet so covered, which I also recommended, was that with respect to the breastfeeding of the child born of surrogacy. A lot of debate around surrogacy goes around surrogate mother, womb renting, exploitation. No one looks at what happens to the child, what happens to the other stakeholders. Just think about it. The child is born, who's going to breastfeed? Yeah. There is no provision in the bill which is talking about who's going to breastfeed. Is it the surrogate mother? You are saying the surrogate mother surrenders the child the moment she gives birth. The couples are waiting and it is to be handed over. Okay, then what about the breastfeeding? The mother, intending mother, who's going to receive the child, she doesn't have breast milk. So either you're going to provide human milk bank, that's still, I think, it's still, under pipeline if they're going to consider, or they're going to, but there are many issues. Some of it got accepted and some of got reflected in the Rajya Sabha report. Besides that, I would like to also say that, one of the things that this entire development in surrogacy law, one of the things which was good was that the bill coming up and having a very expert committee consultation. They invited recommendations from different bodies. That's how people like me, as well as, many medical practitioners and even book authors went and they expressed their opinion. They were called. So one of the ways we could do was that we had to send our memorandum of whatever the provisions of the bill were, and we had to draft our alternative positions. Okay, what we want. So mine, most of it got accepted except for few. So, but I'm very happy with the kind of progressive change it has taken place. But at the same time, when we're speaking of surrogacy now and the bill is not in place right now, I feel like in COVID context, it has brought another perspective. like what kind of mechanism should be there, because when the child is being born in another country, or even if it is in the same country, what kind of measures should be there. That's another area I think which could be taken up. Yeah, that's about it. I think I would like to say about surrogacy. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that those are really great points and great recommendations from your side. I'm sure there's a lot of research and investment that you have put into this. So I'm also curious to understand. So as you mentioned, of course, the monetary and compensating the
Mhm.
surrogate mother is
Mhm.
something that one of the key issues, right? Uh,
Mhm.
so do you have you come across, like, while you're talking during your research, while you're talking to some of the surrogate mothers or the couples, right? So what exactly prompts, because giving birth to a child is something that not anyone
Mhm.
wants to do it, right? It could
Mhm.
be like a coerced or a forced decision from the family,
Mhm.
or it could be an situation that puts them into get into that
Mhm.
mode, right?
Mhm.
So what was your findings when you actually spoke to these surrogate mothers? What prompted them to
Yeah.
accept it? Is it just because
Yeah.
they're underprivileged, or
Mhm.
is it just the compensation, or do they also kind of connect emotionally once they go through this process?
Mhm.
Because it's not like just 1-2 months,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
to go through a tenure of 9 months, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
emotional investment that these surrogate mothers might also go through, right? So
Yeah. Thanks for asking the question. I just want to say that from my experience, whatever surrogate mothers I interviewed, and also the secondary sources that I surveyed and researched on, largely in India, the nature of surrogate mothers, the kind of social, economic, and educational profile or the background, if you see, mostly, of course, I agree with you, they are underprivileged women. They are women who are largely, I can't say they are below poverty line, but they are just right above the poverty line. And we can say there is a compelling factor, but that's like a, no choice or a compelling choice kind of a thing. But I also think that in a welfare state like India, which we have like directive principles of state policy and all that, like, which says that the state has to be welfare oriented. And so much so in our constitution itself, we say that there should be, protection for, women and children, special safeguards should be there. But having said that, and having those laws in our constitution and as well as in other legislations, it's also very sad to see that a lot of women are placed in such a situation where they have no choice but to render to this. I interviewed a lot of surrogate mothers, and they were domestic maids. Some of them were also like, they were doing some kind of a small minor jobs. And they said that, for them, many of them were even migrant laborers also. They said that, that we don't have a better profession because we are probably illiterate or barely school dropouts, and they are not English speaking people. They are not people who are familiar with computer or digital world. And many of them did not even have a bank account. The money they were getting, they were depositing it either in their family members, or some of them had, some of them did not have, some of them have joint accounts with their husbands and all that. So one of the reasons which I found was that the existing labor market is such in India that you cannot engage such a kind of women in any kind of a gainful and dignified employment. Another issue which I thought was that many women told that they were domestic maid and they were sexually abused when they were also working as domestic maid. They also faced some kind of a harassment, but they said that there was no kind of a, for us, any place we cannot have any complaint forum. Okay, many of them did not have even the basic government identity cards, because they have come from some state to some state to work, okay, for a certain duration of time. They got to know about this through some people who are in their neighborhood. They heard about it and all that, so they joined. Another thing regarding the decent employment was that, which I thought was one of the strong reasons many women said that, in this profession we get a lot of dignity. When we are working as domestic maid, people ask us to do a lot of, menial jobs. They use abusive words. We are hired and fired any day, anytime. There is like people cut our wages, and things like that, which I also felt that, yeah, that is also true. It's also very oppressive, the kind of labor they are existing, the setup they are in. And we're not giving them any grievance redressal forum, and nobody is providing them anything. And they said that this is, for them, this is very enabling, because at least they are interacting. There is a written agreement. Okay, they are telling their family members, at least their husband or their mother and father, and they are staying in a hospital accommodation. There is a nurse, and many of them were telling me that we never had such kind of a food in our whole lifetime. Even when we had our own baby, we never had. So this was one such. And again, coming to this whole emotional attachment issue, many people ask that question. But surprisingly, I found many surrogate mothers telling me that, we are very emotionally connected with our own children. This is one of the reasons why we became surrogate, because we want to provide them a better future. Many surrogates said we are doing it for the school education of our children. They want to build home. Many said that we want to marry our daughter for medical treatment, to pay off some debt in order to get some land, ancestral property. So these were the answers which made me think that, yeah, in a way, they have a different alternative reason also. And the kind of life they have lived, that was also not free from exploitation and abuse. Okay.
Yeah.
It is our view of seeing it that, they are renting room, but for them, they think it is a very nobling profession, because the couples who come, they thank them enormously. I have seen many couples breaking down and crying, and that time they want to give their property, everything and anything, because once they see the baby in their hand, like, this is delivered by this woman, and for them, they literally touch their feet and all. So for the couple and for the kind of engagement and the language they are spoken to, for them it is also very dignified, and I saw it up close and personal. So I thought, yeah, it is really really heart touching. And the kind of complaints they have also against in our existing labor system, I think that also needs to be taken account. In India, we only have recently regulated our labor codes, and we're talking about social security. But in surrogacy, they get insurance, they get food, they get wages, and with their existing eligibility, what they have, they can fit in this sector. Okay. And the emotional attachment, yes, with the surrogate children, many of the surrogate mothers have spoken that, yeah, we would like to see the child. We would like to know, how the child grows after 1 or 2 years. Maybe a picture or two can be sent to us. They have some kind of a connect that they build, but they are more keen to go back to their family. They want to see their own children. They are like living in the hospital or the clinic for 7, 8 months, and they are desperate to see their own children and spend time. So they are like, we are very emotionally attached with our own children back home. One of the ground, prerequisite is that you have to, in order to be a surrogate in India, you have to have your own child, one child at least, and to have a healthy prior pregnancy. So sometimes I feel, because of our media or whatever narratives, we are only thinking of emotional attachment of this surrogate mother with the child in the womb. They are also very closely attached with their own children, and they want to go back home and see. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I see that you've also done your research. I see that you have done your research working closely with the Maharastra Legal Services Authority, right? I see you work closely in women prisons, and you've done field research, understanding the mental state of these women inmates with children, right? So what was the whole experience like, and what was your work primarily focused on when you were working in the women prison?
Yeah. Thanks. I was associated with the work with the Maharashtra Legal Services Authority, as well as the IG Prison, Inspector General Prison, Maharashtra, and they supervise all the prisons. So largely I worked with most of the prisons who have women inmates. So I worked with both women under trials and a little bit with the women convicts in the prisons in Maharashtra. And I had this opportunity as Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. We at the School of Law, we have something called fieldwork, where the faculty engages along with a team of students to visit this kind of, government agencies or correctional centers where a disadvantaged section of community dwells, and how we can provide them some social legal help. One of such was my endeavor to work to provide legal aid and assistance to the women prison inmates. And this was a district level prison, and wherein I worked with the women prison inmates, mostly their health needs, maternal health needs, and some of the women inmates, they're also placed with their children up to 4 years inside the prison. So I was closely working with them. So I found, like, through my field study, because we conducted a series of interviews of these women, we also did a lot of observational study and reporting on what is the situation and the infrastructure of the prison. I found that one of the gap is that there's a huge amount of gap with respect to legal awareness. Like, I think the women inmates themselves are not aware of what are the charges leveled against them. Forget about any other law. Like, once they are brought in the prison, mostly the women inmates who were in prison in Maharashtra, I saw many of them were picked up as working from some brothels, Kamati Pura, and those uh, red light areas. Also, a lot of women from Bangladesh and other neighboring countries and all that, and some women, because they are also probably they are victims of trafficking, so they have come from one country to another country or one state to another. Series of women were also involved in economic offenses, but largely I found that these women are not aware of the clear position of law. They don't know what charges are leveled against them. What is the sentence? Is it bailable? Is it not bailable? Then, if it is bailable, then what's the bail amount? What is not the bail amount? Do you need, a surety for you to stand, and those kind of basic legal awareness is not there. Okay. Though in Maharashtra, we have Maharashtra State Legal Services Authority, and they are quite a functional body. And one of the projects we worked on was to create legal awareness in prison. So I had to take sessions for these women inmates, talking to them about most of the common offenses in which women are arrested. So where their matters can go, what are the charges? Is it bailable? Then what kind of grounds you can take up. Like, one of the grounds which I told them was that since they are women, and also they have children. Like, some of the women placed in Bacha Barrack. It's called Bacha Barrack, where women are placed with children up to 4 years, or women who's pregnant. At the time of admission in the prison, they conduct a test. So if like medical test, and then they see if you are pregnant already, then they place you in Bacha Barrack and you have delivery at the hospital, government hospital itself. But in such scenario, I saw that they need to be told that since they have a child already with them, it can be a favorable factor for them to at least get a bail. Yes. And also about their health needs. That was again another consideration for me to work on, because I saw that the women who are pregnant or lactating, their nutritional needs are different. And there is a very general kind of a diet which is given in the prison. And there is only just an additional amount of milk and eggs which is provided to them. Is it sufficient? And what if the newly born child, they need vaccines, they need a lot of things, not only food, they need towel, they need this, that, a lot of, if the woman does not have breast milk,
Basic
then
health.
all those breastfeeding,
yeah,
breastfeeding kit and all those things are required. So we recommended to the IG prison in our report that this kind of infrastructure is needed. Some support staff is also needed. If the woman has delivered through C-section, right away she cannot be placed back in the prison and immediately to take care of her own child. So we need some kind of safeguard for such women. So we had submitted a report to the IG prison. It was well received. It was also well received by our institute. We also went to Delhi in one of the forums where some of the members of the Law Commission were also there, NHRC members were there. Also, some of the academicians were there, where we presented this report on the Bacha Barrack. Yeah. So largely, I worked precisely, if you say, on the health conditions and the plight of the children who are living with the women, and also the infrastructure bit, because the kind of infrastructure which is there in the prison, in any prison, not only in Maharashtra, in any prison, is not very sound to say, and a lot needs to come up. Yes.
Yeah. Right. So that's quite inspiring work, right? Now I think I have a bunch of questions. A lot of students would commonly, want ask us about, the further studies in this profession and around the research part, right? So we have actually collected some of the questions. So the first question is about the LLM, right? So a lot of students, I think, confused 1-year LLM and 2-year LLM. So if you could just, talk about what is the difference and what's the scope of this?
Yeah. First of all, as you speak now, just a few days back, on 4th January 2021, Bar Council of India has announced that now there is only one LLM which is going to be there from the upcoming academic year. Okay, so there will be only 2-year LLM. But right now, 1-year LLM is also going on in many places, many institutions. At the same time, 2-year LLM is also going on. So one thing I would like to say that both the LLM, either 2-year or 1-year, as of now, as this academic year is going on, is worth doing, because this gives the whole idea of doing LLM is to get a specialization in law. the idea is you can choose any specialization area, because LLB is quite a generic course where you study 40 to 50 subjects of law. Now, when you come to LLM, please make a choice. If you want to do human rights LLM, you want to do corporate, you want to do IPR, you want to do cyber law, so you should choose one of the stream and think of specialization. And LLM is also very good if you're thinking of higher positions in law. Like if you're going for a litigation career also, I will not say that LLM is not a bad, like LLM is still a good idea. It's not a bad option, because with LLM you can specialize, you will get more knowledge. If you're going to be a practitioner, probably you could be a better lawyer of women and child law. You could be a better at, if you do corporate law, you could be a better litigating lawyer of income tax or mergers and acquisition. So LLM just gives you a little more thorough knowledge, research, and also it sharpens your research writing capacity, because you get a lot of time to write your dissertation, that which you've not done in your LLB. So I think your research opportunities, writing opportunities, presentation, and all that skills are developed. Yes.
Okay, okay. So also I think there is one very confusing part a lot of students do want to know. So is there, and even including myself, okay, so is there a PhD in law, or it's just, I mean, all these graduates, they do pursue research in humanities, or, what is it? Like, do people need to do their thesis in human rights, or is there specifically a PhD in law?
Yeah. Yeah, I know many students have posed this question to me also. There is a PhD in law, and PhD in law is a standalone separate degree that you can take up from any law university, such law university which offers masters and postgraduate courses. You can segregate and identify universities which do or which offer PG studies. Under that, you have a standalone separate degree called PhD in law. Now, there is nothing such as PhD in human rights, but you can have, like, if you're doing an MA, for instance, okay,
Yeah.
then you can go for something like PhD in human rights and other things. That will be a degree conferred in arts. So you have PhD in arts or humanities. You don't have PhD in law. In order to do PhD in law, you must have an of course, BLLB degree or LLB degree. Then you must have LLM. And nowadays, in order to enroll in PhD, there is an entrance exam which is held. So you have to do the entrance exam, and then you have, I think, a viva or a presentation, and thereon you just get enrolled in the PhD course. Yes.
Okay.
And generally, PhD in law is around 3 years, 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And it depends. You can do it both with the job, without the job. Most of the universities, they have full-time and part-time PhD in law. Yeah.
Okay.
So you just have to check the concerned law university websites.
Okay. So you said LLM is mandatory, right? So, and I think
Yes.
some students also want to know, is MPhil is also needed? Can they also pursue PhD after MPhil?
Yeah, one thing I would like to say, MPhil stands abolished right now, because with the recent National Education Policy 2020, MPhil degree as such stands abolished now. Now, the students, what they can do their LLB, they can do their LLM, and right after LLM, you can enroll for PhD. You can apply for PhD entrance examination, and you can sit in for the PhD course directly.
Okay. Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
there's one more question from the students. Okay.
Yes.
So what does it take for someone to get started? I mean, basically, you see now a lot of students focus or invest time doing moots, internships, and
Yes.
research, right? So what do you recommend to them? Is this the right path, or you know?
Okay. Yeah, I think personally, any sort of internship or industry-based experience or any sort of unpaid, paid experience is very welcoming, and it's worth learning, because while you are either enrolled in LLB or LLM, you are only learning in the classroom, very textbook kind of an approach. So once you work, either you start working with an NGO or with a firm or with a litigating lawyer or with any of the practitioners also, who may not be per se lawyer, maybe NGO worker or human rights practitioners. You can work with them, because you get to know then what is the professional side. Because when you are in the classroom space, you only see one small segment of the law, which is written, and but how does it work on the ground? What is the applicability? How do you apply? How do you prepare papers? And what it takes, what kind of meetings are held, what kind of protocols are observed. I think it's very important that you do internship. And I'll say there are lots of law websites which offer internship, paid or unpaid. I think it's worth doing. I'll strongly recommend it.
Okay. So
Yeah.
finally, if I have to ask you, what are your top 3 pieces of advice for anyone to get good at this profession, or in general, right? So how do they start well in this journey?
Okay. First of all, I don't think so there is any time to start it. You can start as and when you want, but only there's an age requirement for LLB. For LLM, there is no age requirement. There is no upper or lower limit for it. So you can do your research, LLM or Ph.D. at any stage, at any age. Any time is a good time, I personally feel. And the second thing I would like to say, in order to be good at law, first of all, you have to learn to have a reading habit. I think that's really, really important, because you have to develop a reading habit. Either you read magazines or you read books, but you have to start reading, because at one point of time, you will be given a lot of work. Either you are researching, either you are litigating. You have to go through papers. You have to learn to make notes. You have to learn to identify what are the key issues or key points. Second thing, be contemporary. In law, there is nothing which is obsolete. And if you have to keep yourself very updated, because as I was speaking right now to you, I said that just with this circular of 5th January, this 1 year LLM is going to be abolished. So you have to be very, very aware of what is the recent development which is going on. And third thing, also learn to write. Either you start with a blog or you write your own diary, but learn to write and put your thoughts, because that's going to help a lot in law.
Okay.
Yeah, these are the 3 things which I'd like to say.
And lastly, would you like to share some of the top, let me ask you in this way, like people whom do you, look up to in this profession, your mentors, or,
Oh, there are so many.
Okay. So
there are so many.
That you would like to recommend specific books?
Yeah, I would say there's a book, The Rebel by Ram Jethmalani. It's worth reading. Okay. There are lots of books. I would not have to name, but you can read any of the books by Palkiwala. Okay. Then there are some books by Falias Nariman. I think he's also an excellent author. Besides that, also, I think not necessarily books. If you are into short kind of a reading, just read the editorials in, I think, most of the newspapers, except Hindu, Indian Express. That's pretty good. Besides that, there are some law journals published by various universities. I would recommend my own alma mater, NLS Bangalore. I would be a little biased about it, but yeah, why not? So NLS Law Journal is a good idea if you just want to get an update. I think start with Law Review for the law students. Just read the Law Review, or read SEC online, or even I worked for a brief time with a magazine, Flair Talk, which is published by AIR, All India Reporter. So read from AIR also. I think that's also pretty good, because you get just the recent amount of what are the present legislative developments or judicial developments.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So thanks a lot, Sonali, for such an insightful session. And I'm sure, a lot of young professionals.
Thanks to you for having me. Yeah. Thanks to you. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And wishing you all the very best in all your future projects.
Yeah. Thank you.